Yeah, welcome to this talk today by a very distinguished speaker and guest, S.Y. Quraishi Saab, who has served the Election Commission as the 17th Chief Election Commission of India. Dr. Quraishi was an alumni of St. Stephen College, Delhi, and he did his PhD in Communication and Social Marketing. Quraishi Saab has also been a visiting professor at the Cluster Innovation Center, University of Delhi, as an honorary professor. Quraishi Saab has published quite extensively in recent times, and some of his most recent publications are The Great March of Democracy, published by Penguin, and he has also published the very notable book, popular book titled An Undocumented Wonder, The Making of Indian Elections, published by Rupa. And his most recent book, which is The Population Myth, is published early this year by Harper Collins. And today's talk would be based on his most recent publication, which is The Population Myth. Dr. Quraishi would be speaking about newfound concerns about population myth, population explosion, myth or realities in India. As we all know, we usually have these chair remarks, brief chair remarks, then we ask and invite the speaker to speak for around 30-40 minutes. Then the discussant, Professor Manjari, would be taking over, fleshing out some of the key ideas which emerge from the talk, and we'll open it up for question and answer session. I would request the participants to kindly pose their question in the chat box, even as the the public talk progresses. Before we hand it over to the speaker, let me just briefly spell out some of the important things which strike me when we talk about the population myth. Demographic studies, and for that matter, controlling population, has invariably been a concern not only of democratic system but also of totalitarian system, precisely because of this robust causal relation that it has with the nature of welfare, of opportunities, or in terms of the economic development, so and so forth. In Indian context, this has been a very contentious issue because in the 1970s, the Congress government, under the initiative of Sanjay Gandhi, initiated this two-child policy, which was coercively sought to be implemented, but somehow it did not eventually get effectuated because of the backlash that it received from diverse segment of Indian population. But what is interesting is also the kind of causal relationship that population has with voting or the pattern of democratic participation in India, given that you also have variations across communities in terms of the total fertility rate. If you look at the National Family Health Survey, the fourth as well as the fifth round, you'll find that the total fertility rate of communities have drastically come down, and that has been a major concern, especially when it comes to the Muslim population. In the last round of National Family Health Survey, for example, the total fertility rate of Muslim is just around 2.6%, which is barely above the the population replacement ratio. When you compare this with the Hindus, for example, which is around 2.1%, and compare or extrapolate with the all Indian national level, which is 2.2%, I think there are huge issues and concerns and apprehension that somehow population control is used in ways that targets particular segment of society. So the concern is palpable, especially in the recent attempt by the UP government to initiate and introduce population control by linking up with certain segment of incentives or disincentives. So the relationship between population and welfare, or the relationship between population or economic benefits of development of patterns of livelihood has been not as straightforward as is often presented. The deep implication of politics into this, in effect, is something which is a matter of great concern and which also merit, academic intervention as well as a very objective analysis. So Dr. Quraishi has published this new book, the on this issue, especially on issues pertaining to the issue of population explosion among the Muslim community, and how politics is imbricated in the way the issue has been discussed and debated in the Indian context. So the talk could be based on this latest publication of Dr. Quraishi. With excitement and with much pleasure, we are grateful that Dr. Quraishi has consented and agreed to be a part of this intervention. Without much ado and without standing before you and the speaker, may I now invite Dr. Quraishi to deliver his public lecture, as I said, for around 30-40 minutes. So over to you, Dr. Quraishi.
Thank you, Professor. Very kind of you for your generous introduction. You have set the ball rolling. You have given the background in which this debate is being conducted. Recently we have been hearing about BJP governments in UP, Assam, and everywhere talking about population policy out of the blue, suddenly. Now, what is the provocation? Well, population has been a concern for a long time. Population explosion has been talked about for 40, 50, 60 years. But right now, when things had already settled down, and in the sense that we were almost nearing the goal of replacement rate of 2.1, for the benefit of those who may not be familiar, replacement ratio of 2.1 indicates that there are two parents. When they pass away, they leave behind two children, and therefore they are replaced by the two children. 0.1 is to provide for deaths of children, which also happen occasionally. So to provide for that. So if the birth rate is 2.1, it means that we have reached the replacement rate. Only the existing population will get replaced, and there will be no further growth in population. Now, when 22 of 29 states have already achieved the replacement rate, or they have gone even below, where was this need? Except political mischief. Because this has been used for polarizing the Hindus and Muslims for as long as we can remember. And the slogan is that Hum Panch Hamare 25, Hum Char Hamare 40. That is, every Muslim has 4 wives and 25 members in the family, or 40 in the family, 4 wives and 40 children. So this has been the slogan coming even from the top of our leadership. Now, but what are the facts? What is the reality? I had studied this subject for over 2 decades now, although it started accidentally when UNFPA country director came to me in 1995, asking me to write a paper, a strategy paper for promoting family planning among the Muslims, because Muslims had the least family planning practice at that time. I resisted because I was not an Islamic scholar. I'm not even today, nor had I ever worked in family planning department. So I tried to wriggle out of it, and I argued with the gentleman that I'm not the best man to write on the subject, but he got after me. And incidentally, he was offering me a very good honorarium also, 1.5 lakh rupees for 1 month, which was a lot because the salary of my salary at that time was just 5,000 rupees. Now, but instead of getting tempted, somehow there was an inner voice which told me that I should, if I'm going to write this, it should be pro bono. I insisted that I'll do it free. He said, no, we don't take any free work. You have to charge and we'll pay you. So we settled on a royal sum of 1 rupee. Now, whether it is 1 rupee or 1 million, it is a financial transaction. So we said, let us follow the procedures of Government of India. You write to me a letter, I'll take Government of India approval, and we will sign a contract, which we did. Anyway, it instead of 1 month, it took me 5 months, and what I came out with was eye-opening. It opened my eyes, it opened my mind, and I realized that there are so many myths with which we suffer, and I was one of the victims. So I wrote a paper, 32, 33-page paper, which was very well received, widely circulated. And since then, there has been a demand that I expand it into a book. Now, incidentally, 5 years later, I was in London staying in a hostel with my daughter, who is a student of Professor Jyotirmaya Sharma. And I got a phone call from somebody who introduced himself, a gentleman from Hyderabad, by the way. He was the president of Muslim Doctors Association of UK. And he said, Quraishi, we have read your book, we have read your paper, and we have some issues to discuss with you. I thought the tone was a little threatening, and I didn't want to get beaten up in London, so I tried to get out of it by saying that I'm returning. My flight is the next day. So next day morning, 10 o'clock, they reached the airport. There was a guy. And with what they said, still family is conspiracy. They hire through agency. I not taking 1 rupee. I haven't taken it till it's all rubbish, because I have not taken any money, and I've written it's a love of labor, and I'm willing to argue that it may be the Western world may be against Islam. They surely are. They need to manufacture an enemy after the demise of communism and the breakdown of USSR. So, and they had invented a notable enemy, which was Islam. So, cannot be conspiracy. This is what happened, that they will be producing 9, 10 children and will ask us to keep our family small, which was not the case. They had even gone below the replacement rate. USA, UK, and I gave those statistics to them. And of course, they probably had no answer. And they said, no, read this, read that. And this is from a Christian doctor, and this is from so-and-so. All right, give me whatever material, I'll read it. Send me more, I'll read it. But don't accuse me, and go through my paper with a different lens. So anyway, that is a side story, which is an interesting origin of the book. But ever since this paper was written, and I gave many lectures after that, for that also I never charged any honorarium, because I thought, let this be my contribution to is getting together for India's unity in diversity. And if you have got my book, you would see the indication of the book to India's abiding identity, of which I'm proud, and we are all proud. Now, why did it take 25 years? Because every time I was, number one, I was busy in various other things, my jobs. And in between, I wrote a couple of books on election, because I was in the election commission and I learned a lot about that. So, but every time my book was nearing completion, based on the Government of India data of National Family Health Survey, which comes every 5 years, a new data will come. So I'll have to go through the book again to see whether this new data has changed my conclusions. Fortunately, every time it was, instead of changing the conclusion, it was reaffirming and reiterating the stand which I had taken. Finally, after 4 NFHS surveys which have been included, this book is out just in time, because the 5th survey results are about to be declared, and I don't know, I'm keeping my fingers crossed. But I'm reasonably sure, considering the 4 surveys before it, the trend which was followed in these 4 surveys, that the 5th survey will be no different. But anyway, that is speculative. Now, what are the myths that have been propagated, which I'm dealing with? I've summed up, I've written about many of them, but mainly 5. First of all, that Muslims produce too many children, and they are responsible for population explosion. This is the first myth. Second is that it is disturbing the demographic balance of the country. Third, that it is an organized conspiracy to overtake the Hindus to capture political power. And fourth, that they use polygamy, marrying 4 wives and producing 20 or 40 children for increasing the population. And finally, that this is a myth among the Muslims more than others, that Islam is against family planning. Now, what is the reality of these 5 myths? First of all, the impression created that Muslims produce so many children that it is responsible for population explosion. It is true that Muslim birth rate is the highest, even today. But the impression which is created in public mind is by the propagandists that if a Hindu family, I'm sorry, I must seek your pardon for talking about Hindu-Muslim through this, because this is unfortunately the subject of discussion. Now, that if the Hindu family had 2 children, a Muslim family had 8 or 10 children. That is the general impression everybody had, and I must admit that even I had. Whereas the reality is that at no point in time, the gap was more than 1 child. If Hindus had 2, Muslims had 3. If Hindus had 5 children, Muslims had 6 children. So on the basis of just 1 more child, to say that they are responsible for population explosion, this was absolutely unfair. Now, the acceptance of family planning among the Muslims is the least, 45, which is 45%. 45% of all Muslims have adopted family planning. But Hindus are not far behind. They are 54%, only 54%. Half the Hindus have not adopted family planning. Only 54% have adopted. And if you contrast it with the 80%, then you will see what I'm talking about. Now, 80% of the Sikhs have adopted family planning, whereas Hindus have adopted, Hindus percentage is only 54%. Therefore, actually, it is not a Hindu versus Muslim issue. Hindus and Muslims are on the same end of the spectrum, which is my conclusion, which I'm just mentioning upfront, because I'll be arguing on that line. That if Muslims have the highest birth rate, second highest is in the Hindus. If Muslims have the least family planning, the second least is the Hindus. Therefore, to point fingers against the Muslims is absolutely wrong and unfair. Now, I mentioned to you that at no point the gap was more than 1 child. To be precise, actually it was 1.1. Now, even that gap has now come down to less than half, 0.48. 0.48 is the difference between Hindu and Muslim children. On which basis to put the entire blame of a population explosion on the Muslims is obviously wrong and perhaps mischievous. Is it disturbing the demographic balance? Saying that they're about to take over, they're going to become a majority. Now, only the demographic proportion which has changed is 4.2. In 1951, which was the first census after independence, Hindus were 84%. And they came down by 2011 to 79.8. 4.2 reduction. Now, this 4.2 reduction was distributed over all communities, mostly the Muslims, no doubt. Now, Muslim percentage went up from 7.98 to 14.2. So, but that percentage, 4 percentage points in 60 years, 4 percentage points in 60 years. Now, from 10% to 51%, which is the majority figure, how long will it take by this schoolboy arithmetic? 600 years. Now, if nothing else changes, then the same proportion which I have mentioned, that the Muslims are adopting family planning now faster than the Hindus, which is why the gap is reducing from 1.1, it has come down to 0.48. If nothing else changes, even then it will take 600 years. And to tell the Hindus that in 5 years or 7 years, Muslims are going to overtake, now you can understand the gravity of the myth. Third, whether it is an organized conspiracy by the Muslims to overtake Hindu population for political power. I have never heard any mullah, any maulana, any Islamic scholar telling Muslim followers to produce more children to overtake political power. I have surely heard them say that they don't practice family planning because family planning is against Islam. And in fact, I did, although most of my book is based on Government of India data, but I wanted to cross-check one point to myself, the role of religion, the non-acceptance of, and I did a short primary study in Hyderabad, Lucknow, and Alwar of Rajasthan. And I found about 70% of the people who had more than 3, 4, 5 children, when I asked them what is the reason, they said that their religion is against it. I asked them, who told you that? They said the Maulana, Imam. I went to the Maulana and the Imam and said, look, this is what you're saying. How did you know? Who told you? What is the source of your information? And of course, they had no very specific hadith or Quran, words from the Quran to tell me. But they said, yes, that is what we have heard from our that is the situation. Now, I'm happy with this feedback because that gives us an action. Remember, UNFP wanted me to write a strategy paper to promote family planning among the Muslims. So one chapter is dedicated to that, how to promote family planning among the Muslims, what kind of communication strategy to adopt, and so on, but maybe we could come to that later. Now, the fourth myth that Muslims do polygamy to produce many children. Now, polygamy, it has 3-4 myths within this topic. Now, polygamy in India is just not possible because of statistical reason, because you have all heard of the gender ratio. Now, gender ratio in India is adverse for the last 100 years. What does the gender ratio mean for how many women are there for 1,000 men? And the last census, 2011, showed us that there are 940 women for 1,000 men. Now, 2 years ago, when I was writing the book, it was 922 women for 1,000 men. Now, which is a sad story in itself. It's a story of gender discrimination. We don't allow even the girl children even to be born. There is so much of feticide, female feticide or an infanticide. So, which is why the ratio is going down. In fact, I have given one statistic that below 18 age group, in the last 18 years, what is the ratio? That the gender ratio has come down further from 945 in this age group to 918. Now, where is the second woman? I want to marry that second woman. She doesn't exist because even 100, 1,000, every single man has not got one wife. Only 922 women are available to 922 men. 80 men have no wife. So where is the second woman available for me or you who want to would like to marry a second or the third? So it is statistically not possible. Now, in fact, I have also quoted interestingly one Government of India study of 1975. It is called the Status of Women in India Committee. And it found that all polygamy exists in all communities in the country. 15% among the tribals, about 9-10% Buddhists, Jains, Christians, Sikh, and Hindus 5.8, Muslims 5.7. The least polygamous community in India, according to Government of India survey, are the Muslims. And to call them names and say that hum panch hamare 25, what can be more atrocious than that? Now, thirdly, there is a myth among the Muslims also in this context about the Islamic position on polygamy. There is only one verse in the Quran. The source of Islamic law, Sharia, as you all know, is mainly the Quran, supported by hadith, which is what the Prophet said or did as reported by his contemporaries. Now, what is the Quranic position? There is only one verse in the Quran which talks of polygamy. And this is how it goes. You can marry 2, 3, or 4. Now, I go running to get my second and third and fourth wife because of Islamic sanction. But wait. Now, what follows is that provided you can treat them with absolute equality, which only God knows is very difficult. Therefore, you are advised to marry only one. Now, every Maulana, every ulama, every Islamic cleric talks about it, that it is a permission. It is not an injunction that you must marry more women. It is only a permission. And which is a historical context, because that was the time when, because of the tribal warfare, people, the men would be killed and they were leaving behind orphans and widows. So the surah or the chapter in which this ayat has come was about the orphans, where God is saying that treat the orphans fairly, with justice. Do not misappropriate their property. Do not substitute their good thing with your bad thing. And the best will be that from among those orphans and widows, from among those orphans, you can marry 2, 3, or 4, provided you treat them equally. Now, what is the context? That I say that there is not just one condition. Actually, there are 2 conditions. This permission is with 2 conditions. Condition number 1 is from among the orphans and widows. You can marry 2 and 3 or 4. But that doesn't mean that you just bring them and put them in the kitchen to wash your dishes, whereas your first wife is the queen, that you treat them equally. That is the context. So, purely out of context, if I start feeling that I'm authorized to marry up to 4 wives, then I start looking for them. That is not the Islamic position. That is a myth from which a Muslim ulama may suffer, and that needs to be corrected also. The final myth is Islam against family planning. So I studied that also. And to my surprise, I found that Islam actually 1400 years ago supported family planning. When there was no population pressure anywhere in the world, and nowhere in the Quran, family planning is prohibited. There are various verses which are interpreted by people for or against. There are only interpretations of verses. No verse in the Quran is prohibitive of family planning. Whereas anything which Allah wanted prohibited, He explained to us through the Quran in detail. Drinking is haram. Rape is haram. Taking interest on your money is haram. And there is a verse in the Quran which says that whatever we wanted to prohibit for you, we have explained to you in detail. Now, does it mean that Allah forgot to mention about family planning, which is why He did not prohibit it? Because He did not say anything, because He didn't want to prohibit it. So, in fact, I've mentioned all the verses which are interpreted for or against family planning. I've mentioned them all. But my own interpretation, there is a verse in the Quran, and you please tell me whether I'm right or wrong, which says that I'll just tell you what it is. The verse says that let those who do not find the means to marriage keep themselves chaste until Allah gives them means out of His grace. Chaste means not looking at other women with lust. Now, somebody went to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam because that was the practice. Because if you could not understand something mentioned by the Quran, you needed explanation. So he went to the Prophet. He said, "I'm a poor man. I do not have the means to marry and multiply and have many children, but I have my sexual needs. What do I do?" So Prophet repeated that verse that for those of you who can support a wife and household should marry. For marriage keeps you from looking with lust at women and preserves you from promiscuity. But those who cannot, do not have the means, who cannot marry, should take to fasting, because it's a means of tempering sexual desire. Fasting suppresses sexual desire. So he has even given you a way in support of the Quranic verse that if you have the means, don't marry. Until then, resort to fasting, because that will keep you from looking at lust with others. To me, that there is another hadith which clinches the issue. Somebody who had many children and did not want any more, he went to the Prophet and he said that I have many children and I don't want any anymore, and I want to practice al-azl, which was coitus interruptus, or in loose terms, withdrawal method. I want to practice that, but a Jew was saying that it's a minor infanticide. So on which the Prophet replied, the Jew is wrong, the Jew is wrong. In fact, his exact word, the Jew lied, the Jew lied. That means if you will practice withdrawal, you are not committing infanticide, which means go ahead and do it. So with this hadith, one ayat and two hadith, I think it's a complete prescription for family planning. And what is surprising is that 1400 years ago, Islam is supporting family planning. Now, if you look at the Christian world till today, every sect of Christianity prohibits family planning. They don't even allow the use of a condom. So, whereas Islam was talking of family planning, spacing of children, make compulsory breastfeeding for 2 years in order to ensure spacing so that the children can be looked after properly. In the name of health of mothers and proper upbringing of children, there are verses after verses and hadith after hadith in support of these concepts of health of mother and children, and supporting family planning. So that takes care of the myths among the Muslims about and Muslim and others, whether Islam is against family planning. So now look at some of the facts. You are sitting in Hyderabad. Do you know the Hyderabadi Muslim women do not even have 2 full children? According to the latest data of Government of India, 1.86 children as against 4.11 children of Hindu women in Bihar. Now, if Islam was a factor, Hyderabadi Muslims are better Muslims than North Indian Muslims. They would also be producing many children. But Hyderabadi women are practicing family planning with 1.86 total fertility rate. TFR, or total fertility rate, by the way, is the number of children a woman will produce in her entire lifetime. Now, TFR of Hyderabad, Telangana is 1.86, of Andhra Pradesh is 2, and of Bihar is 4.11. So now, what does this, from where do we come to the figure that Muslims are producing too many children? Do you know there are 22 states in the country where the TFR of Muslims is less than Hindus of Bihar. Why I'm mentioning Bihar? Because Bihar is the most backward in lagging, most behind, which is why that is the standard with which we are comparing. So now UP is a bit better, but also not so good. Now there are 4 states which are actually, because of which we have not reached TFR already. 24 states have already reached TFR of 2.1 or below. 24 states out of 29. Only 5 are left. And they're also nearing achievement in the next 3, 4, 5 years. They will all achieve that. UP, for instance, now there was this population bill of UP, which seeks to achieve TFR of 2.1 by 2026. Whereas the projection in the normal course, the projection for UP is 2.1 in 2025. A year before this policy will achieve, UP would have already achieved it. So what is the purpose? Don't they know it? Now, and secondly, why did this question crop up 4.5 years after the government has been in power? If they were concerned, they should have talked about it earlier. But they did not, only because now the elections are around the corner and they always need an issue to create a rift between Hindus and Muslims. And this is the most favorite topic that Muslims are about to take over. Sure, I will ask the gentleman who say, "Hum 5 hamare 25, hum 4 hamare 40," to show me one out of 1.38 billion people, one person who describes, who fits this description, or accept that they are lying from their teeth. So now this is the something which is all because of politics. So there is a chapter on politics where I mentioned, in fact, I have not heard any mullah telling the Muslim to produce many children, but I have quoted dozens of citations in this where the VHP or RSS and these leaders are telling Hindus to produce 8 or 10 children so that they do not get outnumbered. And suppose this procreation war becomes the reality. Imagine what will be the fate of India. Are they really concerned about population explosion? They are asking their people to produce more children. I believe it will be interesting that if we study whether Hindus have accepted their advice to produce 10 children. I don't think they have, because those figures would have got reflected in the National Family Health Survey, fortunately. In any case, I have appealed to the Muslims through this book that whatever be their propaganda, you should accept family planning. That is good for you. India's population policy actually is a great success, and I have been a votary of population policy for a long time. And I believe that Muslims should adopt family planning very proactively. And I have given a communication strategy for Government of India to follow and to promote in UP and Bihar. Let them do that campaign, and that will be nice. So these are some of the things which I have mentioned through the book. In the end, there's a whole chapter to say that it is Hindus and Muslims are on one side, one end of the spectrum. Because if you see all the graphs, Hindus and Muslims, their bars are shoulder to shoulder. So now what are the real factors which influence family planning? That is the key in this, not religion. But there are several factors. 3 are the most important. One is literacy and education, particularly of girls. As the literacy goes up, the number of children goes down. Across the board, across all communities. Number 2, income. As the income goes up, the number of children goes down. Third, the service delivery. As the service delivery goes up, which means doctors, nurses, contraceptives availability, as that goes up, the number of children goes down. And we found, and there is a chapter on this, that in all these, Muslims are the least. Now, what should be our conclusion? That please reach out, give them more literacy. Have you heard these propagandists talk of Muslim education? They never talk of Muslim education. In fact, we keep getting report that even Government of India scholarship schemes are not reaching Muslim because they don't want Muslims to study, but they want them to practice family planning. Now, have you heard them talk about how to increase their income and prosperity? Never. On the contrary, what we have heard is do not do their economic boycott. Do not buy vegetables from them. Now, if you don't buy vegetables from that Muslim telewala, he will go and produce more children and then you will complain. So now you have to contribute, you have to create the contributing factors, the determining factors, education, income, and service delivery. Nobody wants to go to a Muslim area saying, hatefully calling it mini Pakistan. How many times have you heard a Muslim area being described as mini Pakistan? Is mini Pakistan में क्या जाना? कि डॉक्टर जाके क्या करेगा? यहाँ क्या करना? ये तो ऐसे लोग write them off. So now these are the contributing factors. But despite that, if Muslims are adopting family planning so proactively, it's something to be happy about. So in fact, one thing, talking of a religion, I studied what is the Islamic stance on family planning. And I found internationally, unanimously, all the ulama say that sterilization is un-Islamic. Vasectomy, tubectomy is un-Islamic. Unanimously. Yet, of the Muslims have already undergone vasectomy. Despite knowing that this is un-Islamic, they're so enthusiastic about it that they have adopted family planning. Then what are you grudging? So not bark up a wrong tree, find the unless you diagnose the real problem, how will you cure the disease? Now, the real problem, literacy, unmet need is the highest of the Muslims. And what is unmet need? We need to understand that. As it is difficult for you to convince a Muslim that he should practice family planning. It's very difficult. But if you have convinced him or her, and he is asking for the contraceptives and this facility in the doctor, that is not available to him or her, that is unmet need. Because you don't want to go to Pakistan. So therefore, if it is 16% of Muslims have unmet need. If you immediately meet this need, you will see the figures shooting up. So therefore, I think I stop this and take the question, because I do feel that planning is an issue. I have been, and I must say that to have a national family planning program. It started in 1952. And we have been considering that already 24 of 29 states have achieved it. And many following, then we would be consolidating this population, after which it will only start declining. Anything 2.1 means decline in population because they will not be replaced. So that's the situation. So in such a situation, picking up family planning subject in politics and political debate is actually fraud mischief. And if I, with your permission, just one last word, because you may refer to the emergency of the 1975 and Sanjay Gandhi days. That is something lesson which we should have remembered. That anything pushed down the throat of people will have a backlash. So any forcible implementation of family planning, as was done in 75 to 77, which led to a backlash from which we have not recovered fully till today. And what do I mean by that? Because politicians have been avoiding the subject of family planning and population. They are not talking about it in their speeches. They're not talking about it in parliament. 4 years ago, National Institute of Health and Family Welfare, which is the Government of India's national institute, asked me to chair a committee to study politicians' response to family planning. And we studied parliament questions for 4 successive parliaments, Lok Sabha. Lok Sabha is number 13, 14, 15, and 16 years. That means 20 years. Now, 20 years, we examined the number of parliament questions asked on family planning, and we found that 0.15% of all the questions were on family planning. So it became a taboo subject. Now, suddenly, when we have already achieved it, when we don't need to talk about it, just need to consolidate and take action as 24 states have taken. That is what UP should be doing. But they picked up something for a political purpose. With these words, I thank you very much for your kind questions, and I'll be happy to answer questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Quraishi Sir, for your very informative talk. I would now invite Professor Manjari to discuss the presentation.
Dr. Quraishi, thanks a lot. I join our head of the department, Professor Suan, in thanking you for sparing time and laying before us the broad contours of your book, the main arguments, the main myths you have busted, you have falsified. I mean, these myths have been around us for a very long time. And I mean, you rightly pointed out that these myths have reappeared once again, and we have seen in the state of UP and Assam what all is going on. There's a talk of new population policies, and you have given the reasons also for that. And it's very nice to know that you have worked on this thesis on which came out as a book for 2 decades, and you gave us a bit of the history of that, and that was very, very interesting, and that this paper of yours eventually led to a full-length book. I mean, the myths you have busted today, I mean, if I can just sort of list them out, firstly you said that, this direct trajectory of community, population growth and politics, that the Muslim community is the one which is responsible for the rising birth rates, and, it has too many children. And, what sort of politics it leads to, and what sort of politics is attributed to them, that the Muslims are non-patriotic, they're anti-development, and one fine day and that's going to be very soon, that they'll take over the population of the country and change the country's profile. They'll take over the population of the country, but particularly the Hindu population. That's what the myth is. And of course, you said it's the myth is that it's an organized conspiracy of the Muslims, and this is a stereotype again, which we keep hearing. And of course, you took issue with the other myths, and the one of them is the polygamy myth, that Muslims are the most polygamous, and you busted that as well, saying, and with facts and figures and data and statistics in your book, that that's nonsense, and it's in fact Muslims, on the other hand, are the least polygamous. Then you also talked about religion and contraception, that there's that certain religions prohibit or forbid the use of contraception, and that's why people of certain, individuals and members of certain religious communities don't take to contraception, really well positively. So you said that that's another myth, and you showed that if we compare, it's only 54% of the Hindus who are taking to family planning, and Hindus and Muslims are on the same spectrum as far as the number of children is concerned. There's only a gap of 1 child between them. And if we look at this myth about the organized conspiracy to take over the country, to take over political power, so it would be, it's like, you know, a non-question. It would be 600 years or more, you know, or never to do this. And you also gave us the examples of Hyderabad, Lucknow, Alwar, where you have done your work, where you spoke to people, that, you know, how Muslims have taken to family planning as well as anybody else. And you also brought to us a very interesting issue that polygamy is not possible in India at all, looking at the, you know, very adverse gender ratio, the women-men ratio. And what was interesting for me as well, and I'm sure for our listeners as well, that in 1975 itself, in the, you know, the status of women in India report had come out. I remember Veena Majumdar was the chairperson of that committee. And then itself, way back in 1975 itself, the myth about polygamy was falsified. And it was said, and the facts came out that the Muslims are the least polygamous. You know, you argue that, you know, what are the remedies for if one has to sort of, you know, do a proper, what we call family planning. You said what is important is education of women, literacy, and of course, you also argue that population growth is a factor of economic backwardness, women's dependent status, lower education among women, etc. And it has nothing to do with religion and community. So I just wanted to, you know, just put forward a few questions, which basically, you know, you can sort of take it up from there and make the discussion more rounded. And I'm sure there are other questions waiting as well from the listeners. I mean, you know, we know the politics behind it, this politics of vilification of the minorities and politics of vilification specifically of the Muslim community. But, you know, you have done a very close study, a very granular study of this issue. And I wanted to ask you, you know, when did this question, I mean, one has to go back into a bit of history on this. When did this question about population growth get linked to religious communities? I mean, when did it become religized? I mean, it's not connected to economy, or it's not connected to regions, you know, North Indian, South Indian, you know, other things, but it's connected to religion. So, you know, when did this happen? I mean, roughly, I don't want an exact date or something, but, you know, putting in perspective the times and the politics, I mean, when did this start happening? So this is my first question. My second question to you was that, you know, have we as civil society failed in the messaging? I mean, that we have not been proactive enough to send the right information, to set the record straight on the Muslims and Hindus and others on the context of, on the issue of population growth. And, you know, we have not been able to counter, I mean, we have not been proactive enough to counter the divisive politics, you know, the continued vilification of the minorities. I mean, though, as you point out, the facts are very straight. I mean, you know, if I can just, I'll take half a minute on this, that India's growth rate, as you pointed out, has dropped drastically. I mean, the birth and fertility rates. In 1982, the figure was 4.82 children per woman. And in 2019, this became 2.2. I mean, it's sort of very close to the replacement figure of 2.1, which we have set as a target. And in fact, if you put things in perspective, in China in 1980, this fertility rate was 2.61, which in 2019, it fell to 1.69. Of course, that was because of the one-child policy. But then China had to open up. They said that we cannot do with this because it's harming the demographic dividend. And they said that we go to the two-child norm. And then recently they said we are going to follow the three-child norm. I mean, people are free to have as many as 3 children. So, so the question, I'm going back to the question that have we failed in the messaging that, you know, the people who have written about it, people who know about it, the facts are straight, the statistics there, and we have not been able to counter this politics of vilification of minorities and this wrong attribution to the Muslims that they are the ones who produce the most children, they are baby making factories. Uh, the third question, I mean, this is also something which sort of comes out from your talk and the book, that, you know, we don't talk of patriarchy here anywhere. I mean, when, you know, we talk about socioeconomic status, the economic backwardness, less education among women, you know, women come, but we are not addressing the question of patriarchy. And I'm particularly, you know, I want to bring this forward because, you know, things like family planning, reproductive choices are strongly linked to the feminization of the family space. I mean, even if women get educated, if the family space is not feminized, I mean, you know, it will result in the same thing. There won't be much of a drastic change. You know, and the whole cause then gets defeated of family planning. And I just want to put this in perspective. Like look at the Indian cities. I mean, the major Indian cities. I mean, the top Indian cities have a very adverse gender, men, women, or what we call the sex ratio. Here, the number of girls to boys is very, very starkly low. And these are the spaces where there is education, there's income, there's development, there's urbanization. So, I mean, then why this thing about son preference? And, you know, and the family spaces are not democratized, they're not feminized. And I think we talk about literacy of women, income of women, but we're not talking of patriarchy. I think this is where I think we are missing out the point, and I think we need to address that question as well. I don't know what your views are on that. And then my last question, that when the state has failed to you know, counter these damaging myths and stereotypes about the Muslim community, and of course it helps fortify them also. You know, when a certain regime comes, it's sort of fortifying these myths rather than countering them. So, you know, what are the other sources we can draw on to promote a more factual view of society, you know, a more sort of authentic view of society? I mean, we cannot rely on the state to do this. So where do we look for sources? I mean, where do we go to sort of straighten the record? So with that, I think I've said too much, and I will leave the floor to you to answer the question. And of course, the questions also coming. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Manjari. You have picked up the entire thesis of mine and summed it up in a few words. That's brilliant. You have raised some issues, some questions which I'll answer, but let me also mention one fact which I forgot to mention earlier. About in how many years Muslims will take over this country. Not in 600 years was the childish arithmetic. But not being a mathematician, I requested a professor friend of mine, Professor Dinesh Singh, one of the most brilliant vice chancellors of Delhi University and a very brilliant mathematician. I sent him my data and I said, Professor Dinesh, can you tell me in how many years I can celebrate my capturing the power? He said, Bhaijan, bhul jaiye, not in 1,000 years, never. So, is it because, and then some the absolute numbers also have become important, whereas the proposed percentages can be misleading. In 1950, there were 30 more Hindus than Muslims. Now there are 8 crore more Hindus than Muslims. So is the gap bridging or enlarging? Because the Hindu base is 80%, there are so many, even a fraction of a percent increase there will mean more people will be born. Where since the Muslim base was about 9%, therefore even if they double, they become 18%. And if there is only 10% among Hindus, they become large. Math model which I have included in the book ruled it out totally, completely, forever. Now, when was population connected to religion? In fact, there is a basis to it. Also, Jyotirmoy Sharma is a great these two religions started not from the Muslim League. It started from from the Hindu Mahabharata. So that was time when they started talking about partitioning the country, and he said, Mr. Bhagavad said, that this was the talk in 1930. So obviously before independence, this was the talk, and after partition for some years, that was the talk, but it was it had become quite toned down in the last 2-3 decades, but suddenly it has come up. Now, with this, we should have talked of population policy, for God's sake, certainly 30 years ago, 20 years ago, not when we have already achieved what we wanted to achieve. So when we needed to talk about it, they were scared to talk about it because they remembered the emergency backlash. And they became so timid, they did not talk about it. But I was talking about it. I talked about it 25 years ago. These people did not. So now suddenly, where they felt the need, that's an interesting question. Now, failure in message, I think that failure is because these myths were not exploded by anybody. There have been a few writings here and there, but they have been so scholarly that the scholars write and the scholars read, they do not reach the people. So with the result, the common people never got to know. And ever since I wrote this book, and it's only 4 or 5 months ago, I'm very happy to tell you that the feedback from almost the country's entire media has written about it, and everything positive about it. On television, everything positive, nothing against it. Even if you pick up Amazon to order my book, at least one copy should get sold after this talk. You will find there are 105 comments on my book, except for 4, which are from those Andhbhakts, who for whom any Muslim name is enough for them to start abusing. So except for that, 99% they are all 5-star, 4-star in support, and they are all Hindus. The fact that the Hindus have an open mind. In fact, recently in an interview to a Pakistani journalist, when I said, he quoted me, he reminded me that you had made a statement that India is secular because Hindus are secular. What do you mean? So I said, what I mean is what I said, that Hindus are secular. And I think, look, in 1950, just after partition, when Pakistan was created in the name of a religion, it was very easy for India to become a Hindu state, and nobody could have batted an eyelid. But our Constituent Assembly, by a unanimous decision, not a single vote against, decided for adopting a secular republic, secular. And 83% of the Constituent Assembly members were Hindus. So that is what I think, because the ethos of India is secular, ethos of Hindu is secular, which is why they have taken to mind the findings and the myths which we have talked about so positively and so supportively. They are reacting exactly the way Manjari, you reacted just now. Now, China. Now, we have been talking about China. China is a role model. But China abandoned its one-child norm 5 years ago, in 2016, when they realized the downside of its impact, when 70% of the Chinese are old, productive or unproductive old people. Only 30% young people who are supporting them. They have to support themselves. They have to support their parents and grandparents. So it is going to upset their economy. So they abandoned their one-child norm, two-child norm in 2016. And 3 months ago, they changed over to three-child norm. So should we not learn a lesson from China? Do we want to go the Chinese way? So we have become an economic superpower because of what used to be population explosion 50 years ago became a demographic dividend, because our young people became very productive. And mind you, we have become an economic superpower with only less than 5% of our people suitably employed. Now 5% people are dominating the US and European service sector and sending remittances to the country. 5%. In China, it is 24%. In Korea, 96%. Productive population. The in our education. Only if Indians were suitably employable, the economy would be enormous. So we have to focus on our quality of education. And population explosion versus the demographic dividend, I just explained that so long as we have young people, young population which is productive, and India is a young country with median age of just 28 years. So obviously for another 40, 50 years, this population dividend will be great for us. And after that, in any case, population would have stabilized and would have started declining. Son preference, that unfortunately is the bane of our Indian society. But I must say that among the Muslims, it is the least. Why? Because I have mentioned many verses and hadiths in my book, which talks of girl preference. There is a hadith which says that blessed is that the woman whose first child is a girl. There is another hadith where Prophet is saying that a family which has 3 daughters, they will enter paradise with me, with paradise shoulder to shoulder with me. That is what the Prophet is telling parents of 3 daughters. So the daughter preference and equality of daughters, equality of women, there's so many things in the Quran and Hadith about this, which is why the gender ratio of the Muslims is better than of the Hindus. It is Muslim gender ratio is 951 as against the Hindu gender ratio of 939. So very substantial difference, because in Islam, there is a preference for the girl child and the son preference syndrome. Maybe there are some Muslims who suffer from that, and which is a pity, and we need to ensure that they also their attitude also changes. Now, state has failed to counter. It is a yes and no. It is the same state, the government of India, which filed an affidavit last year in the Supreme Court that we already have a population policy of 2000, which is working very well. It is totally voluntary. We do not believe in force, and our voluntary policy is doing extremely well. This is the state which has countered the propaganda in the Supreme Court last year. Now, but their chief ministers, because this is a newfound interest for obvious reasons, because elections are around the corner. So, which is why suddenly Assam. Now, one good thing I must say, if you look at it critically, I wrote an article in the Indian Express and earlier in the print. At least the Assam chief minister, number one, he is not going to the election just now. So, and he talked of family planning policy, but he talked about it in a Muslim meeting, in a Muslim mohalla, addressing the Muslims. Whereas he should have talked about family planning as a good policy for everybody. So, however, he has done 3 things. The 3 determining factors which I have mentioned to you, literacy, poverty, and service delivery, he has set up 3 separate groups to deal with those issues, which is a good thing. Now, that is the way to deal with the population, and not by condemning a community. Whereas UP, the difference is that the bill says that it will come into force a year later. A year later means you will not see the result in the time of the current regime, because the current regime objective is only the election propaganda and polarization. After the election, they are not bothered. So therefore, they are leaving it to the successor government to deal with it. So its impact will be felt after a year. So what exactly are they trying to do? We all have to see. Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Quraishi. Now I hand it over to our head, Professor Suan, for the other questions.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Manjari, for that very well thought and very thoughtful question that you flagged to have a more rounded engagement with Dr. Quraishi. We'll take up a couple of questions which are there in the chat box. I think although most of them have been answered already. So one of the first question is by Guru Das, who asks that in light of the myths, can we say that the two-child legislation is not needed and concentration should be on family planning programs? That's the first question, and I think Dr. Quraishi might like to take up with the second, which is by Karthike, that given the entrance myth and ideas which are spreading through social media or media rhetoric, how do you then debunk, those myths, or how do we encounter those propagandas, those rhetorics and myths which are spread through social media channels?
Thank you. First was the two-child norm. In the book, the two-child norm was enforced in several states, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, and many, some years ago. And a lady IAS officer from Madhya Pradesh, Mrs. Nirmala Butch, studied the impact of the two-child norm, and she found that it was disastrous for women. Why? The norm had provided that any person who has more than 2 children living cannot contest election for panchayats. So I'm a political animal and I want to cut what I would do. I would divorce my wife. She has to leave the house along with my children, and now I'm a bachelor again, and then I can contest. So there were so many divorces, and sex determination tests increased, and based on that, female infanticide increased enormously. And this is an actual study conducted in 5 states where the disastrous impact of a two-child norm was revealed. Now, in any case, it is absurd that if you have 2 children, you cannot become a sarpanch, but you can become an MLA, you can become an MP. I would say the 50% of UP MLAs have more than 3 children, 3, 4, 5, 7, or 8 children in UP MLAs. I think it should be enforced first on the UP MLAs. Let them be barred from being MLAs, and let them be barred from contesting parliament election. And then they should talk about panchayat. Therefore, it is a sheer absurdity. Now, social media, the other question of social media. Social media is like any other media, actually can be used either way. It's a vehicle. So a terrorist can write that, and you and I can write that. So the fact that it's potential to harm and create mischief and spread rumors. Rumors were always a nuisance in politics and communal riot or any the law and order situation. But social media is really playing havoc. We need to regulate it, and I'm glad that the government of India is thinking about it. I hope with not any adverse intentions, but some regulation is called for. And the way they hide behind anonymity, that is something which I have been addressing, like Facebook and Twitter. They say that we cannot do anything. Now, surely they can identify the account holder and an anonym. If I write anything in Hindustan Times or Indian Express criticizing you, you will sue me. Or say something on a TV channel, you will sue me. And I have a right to criticize you, and you have a right to sue me. But I cannot hide behind anonymity. That is not the freedom of expression. So therefore, anybody is free to criticize the government, criticize individuals, but not hiding behind their identity. And which is where these social media platforms have to understand. They cannot say that, no, we cannot control that. Surely they have every control on our identity. They know who we are. So, the anonymous account should be banned, should be thrown out straight away. Millions of them will go away overnight. That should be done.
Yeah, thank you. There is this question on contraceptive, which I think has been taken care of by the question on family planning, so we will not take this up again. Another question by Amandeep is the following. When there are so much of entrance preconceived notion, which seems to be also quite widespread, especially among the less educated, would awareness programs really helped in containing population explosion? That's one. And second is the question by Nagarajo, which asks that there seems to be a kind of differential indication in terms of the TFR, total fertility rate, and the life expectancy of India, which seems to be showing opposite trends, just like the developed nations. Given that we do not have the economic wherewithal nor the political will, how do we then effectively address, the population of the baby boom or the baby bust, as it were?
Yeah. The awareness programs are surely necessary. They are very important, and the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare has been undertaking this program. But there is a basic flaw there, which I have pointed out. When I was doing my original paper in 1995, I wrote to the then Joint Secretary in charge of this program, asking to tell me what were these special campaigns carried out for the Muslims. Because every document from the beginning has been pointing out that Muslims have the least family planning, which means the task is for us is cut out. We have to address the Muslims. I said, tell me what address have you, or what special measures have you taken to reach out to the Muslims? She wrote an answer which is politically correct, but technically stupid. Politically, in the sense, look, we do not distinguish between Hindus and Muslims. We do not distinguish among communities. I said, damn it, if you come to me as a family planning worker, Quraishi, you have many children, you should accept family planning. And I tell you, sorry, my religion is against it. Since you are not equipped with an answer, you will just hang your head and go away. Now, the fact that Muslims were the group identified as the people producing the maximum children are a different segment. I'm a PhD in social marketing, and social marketing tells us that people are no target audience. There are segments of the audience which we need to address by understanding them. Men and women, rich and poor, urban, rural, young and old. We need to address them, Hindus and Muslims in this case. Now, I'm a Muslim and I say Islam is against family planning. How will you address me? You have to be equipped. I said, what kind of training have you given to your workers? Do they know the answer? And I have volunteered in my book. And look, I've given a complete strategy in a paper. I said, I will develop a resource book for your trainers who reach out to the Muslim community, telling them that Islam is not against family planning. Islam is supportive. So, but you have to equip them. You have to prepare them to give the answer, which they haven't. Therefore, otherwise we'll only go by preconceived notion. The awareness program have to be scientific, based on facts, figures, knowledge, and communicated in an effective way, and not randomly. Then political will. I have mentioned earlier also that of course political will is missing. Was missing, which is why after 1975 nobody talked of family planning, and 0.15% parliament questions were on family planning, and these are only parliament questions. I'm 100% sure that same will be the status if you were to examine the Vidhan Sabha questions also. So politicians started shirking this subject because they realized it was unpopular. It was not gaining them vote, it was only losing votes for them.
Yeah, so there is this question by Abhijit. What is the role of political ideology, or how ideology helps to spread this type of myth, and what we should do or the opposition should do to counter this?
No, political ideology, as I pointed out, is deliberately, it is only one political ideology which is trying to benefit from it by polarizing. Before the Soviet Union broke down, in the Western world, the ideology was that they would frighten their communities with the communists. Bhago, bhago, run, run! Communists are coming. Now, when the communism broke down, Soviet Union broke down, I remember in 1992, I was attending an intelligence bureau briefing of the joint secretaries, and one international expert said, now that the Soviet Union has broken down and communism has disappeared, they will have to manufacture an enemy, the Americans and the Western world, and most probably that enemy will be Islam. So they manufactured an enemy in Islam, and it's overtake. They're here to Germany, here, there, everywhere. But because of typical political situation in India, it suited India the best. The foreign Islamophobia is suiting the Indians the best, and they are benefiting and profiting. Every bomb explosion in the Middle East, in which thrown by a Muslim and killing Muslim politicians, happy to capitalize on it and brand the entire community as terrorists. So, this kind of the way political ideologies are misusing, abusing these incidents for political purposes, for everybody to see. Like you, for instance, the event that you are doing is a good thing. I hope there are many more such events, because my experience so far is that 99% people who participate in this kind of a seminar go back satisfied that yes, they have been fed on a wrong propaganda and the facts are contrary, and surely they will be talking about it to some of their friends and colleagues. That is how 70-year-old, 80-year-old propaganda will not go away in 3-4 months. It might take a little more.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Quraishi. Any quick last comments from the participants or query? Professor Jyoti, you want to say something?
No, the questions I wanted to ask, Manjari has asked them already, so I'm grateful that she did ask those questions.
Yeah, thank you, Jyoti. Then, yeah, thank you once again, Dr. Quraishi, for competently handling and answering the question and having and guess us.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, your questions have been asked, but your comments have not been heard.
No,
surely you will have some comments.
I'm fascinated by the book, and I'm going to read it very soon and learn much from it. I mean, the only comment I have is that I do not put so much hope on the educated people of India as much as Manjari and you do. In fact, our undoing has been the educated more than anybody else. So I have a very dim view of the educated.
Okay, fine then. Yeah, I think some of the nuances in which the correlation between population, economic well-being, or literacy level, or education level, and population or family planning, for that matter, and the way in which social norms, cultural orientation, and the way in which patriarchy intermediate how population policy and family planning might get enacted out in a specific location are very interesting thing, which I think needs further probe. I was quickly looking at the regional manifestation of how this co-relationship might play out in terms of the relationship between say on better economic well-being or higher level of literacy or education level with population control. I'm having in mind, for example, the case of Goa. If you look at the latest round, you'll find that in Goa, the TFR level of Muslim women is lesser, by 0.3%. And when you compare this with, say, Gujarat, you have a 3.3 percentile differences because Muslims seems to be doing better in Gujarat, whereas they are not. But in the case of Kashmir, again, you'll find that the Muslim women TFR level has been slightly higher than the Hindu by just 0.2 percentage differences. So it looks like that there are also regional manifestation of how this co-relationship play out, and in trying to capture the complex ways in which the cultural norms, cultural orientation, and how patriarchy and other multifariate variables influence uh, policy, population policy, family planning, or for that matter, the way in which the civil society and the academia at large engage with this very interesting as well as contentious issue is quite interesting. And I hope that with this new book, you'd generate more interest and we'd have a more informed, dialogue and a discussion about some of the issues which need not be, constricted to the role of religion, but more generally speaking. So, with these words, I, on my personal behalf and on behalf of the Department of Political Science, would like to thank our speaker, Dr. Quraishi, our faculty colleague, as well as friends from different parts of the country, and also like to especially thank Dr. Manjari for fleshing out very thoughtful questions and discussion in this public talk. So I would now invite Desdeep, who is the boy behind the big room, who manages this talk, so to propose a vote of thanks.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I want to thank Dr. Quraishi for accepting our invitation and making time for us this evening. And the session was really informative and provided us, interesting arguments as well as data to argue against misconceptions and, false narratives and indeed the myth. So I believe that majoritarian myth has been debunked, and now the media and the other concerned citizens would disseminate this study you have done. And I hope that people of Uttar Pradesh will vote for health, education, and other issues. And I also want to thank Professor Manjari Katju, Professor K.K. Suan, and all the people who joined today. Both Professor Manjari Katju and Professor Suan were very kind, and I want to thank for their kindness and making this possible at a very short notice. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you then.
Dr.
Yeah.
Quraishi.